Ladies, let's go ahead and get started this morning.
But I never did.
As Vice Regent, one of the privileges that I have is to be able to schedule the programs that are presented at our chapter meetings. I knew when I became Vice Regent, I'm sorry, not Vice President, but I knew that one that I wanted to have was Mr. Bob Jarnagin, because he is a plethora of information about Jefferson County. When I called Bob and he graciously accepted, I was over the top. I knew that we were going to have a good day. So he is endearingly known as Bob Jarnagin, but he is Robert D. Jarnagin. He's married to our very own Miss Susie Blank, the former Susie Blank of Jefferson City. Bob graduated from Maury High School in 1972. He graduated from Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem in 1976.
Go Deeks!
Yeah. He has a bachelor's of science degree in business. He's worked at his dad's business, well, his family business, the H.B. Jarnagin Company. It's an insurance agency across the street here since 1976, and he is currently the owner and president of that agency. He has been very active in the United Way since it was organized in Jefferson County in 1985, and previously was the Jefferson County Volunteer Contributor, which was previously the Jefferson County Volunteer Contributors Organization. He is the president of the Dandridge Memorial Library. He is on the board of directors at the First Tennessee Bank here in Dandridge. He's a member of the Jefferson County Historical and East Tennessee Historical Society. He's a member of the Jefferson County Genealogical Society. He is Jefferson County Chamber of Commerce Volunteer of the Year Award he received in 2001. He was appointed to Jefferson County Historian in July of 2006. Jefferson County Citizenship Award in 2008 from the Senior Citizens Home Assistance Service. He received the Samuel M. Walton Leadership Award, wow, in 2009. Jefferson Countian of the Year for 2009, awarded by First Tennessee Bank at the annual Jefferson County Chamber of Commerce banquet. He is the Jefferson County Historical Society. He is in the Jefferson County Historical Society Hall of Fame, and that was an award. I'm sorry. Yes. And he conducts the guided walking tours of the Dandridge Historic District and gives presentations to various organizations about earlier Jefferson County history. Ladies, welcome Bob Jarnagin.
Did everybody get two handouts?
Not yet.
Okay, I've got two handouts. One is your list of players, I call it, which are the organizations and people that I'll be talking about today. And one is a comparison of facts between Cherokee Lake and Douglas Lake that you're going to receive. And I think you're going to be surprised to see how similar these two reservoirs and lakes are, that one on the north side of Jefferson County, one on the south side, Douglas. Once everybody gets their handouts, I'll start. I'm going to go ahead and get started while you all are passing those around. Your program for today that I prepared for you is titled The Douglas Project, History Lost, History Made, Conflicts of Government, War, and Heritage. In my opinion, the two most significant historical events that have impacted the lives of the people in Jefferson County were, one, the Civil War. 42,000 troops occupied this valley in East Tennessee during the winter of 1863-64, and Jefferson County was split right down the middle in their loyalties. You had cousins fighting against cousins, and there's even cases of brothers being on opposite sides of that conflict. The other historical event was the coming of TVA to Jefferson County, where they constructed Cherokee Dam across the Holston River, and then followed right up with Douglas Dam across the French Broad River. Most of the material that I use for this program I have taken from newspaper scrapbook that Reverend Rural Pritchett kept for many years. He was an opponent of the project, the Douglas Project, and he kept a very extensive scrapbook of every newspaper article in this area that came out in the pre-planning of this project and during the construction, and even kept articles for 20 years later if they involved Douglas Lake. This is a picture of our very own Reverend Rural Pritchett. He was probably what we would consider one of our first county historians before we had an official county historian, was the Reverend Rural Pritchett. I just got this picture yesterday from Katie Huffaker. She brought me some things to my office, and so I just got that and added it to my program yesterday. But I went through his scrapbook, every single article, and read it, and what I've done is I've developed a timeline of events that I'm going to go over with you, and then I will read some of the articles that I feel like are interesting or pertinent to the project. Douglas Dam construction started February 2nd of 1942. The water was impounded starting February 19th, 1943. I've heard it called a world record for the project of this magnitude. The total cost of the project, $45 million. Douglas and Cherokee were built on round-the-clock schedules to furnish power for the national defense crisis of World War II. Our first headline, September 11, 1941. Douglas Dam opponents replied to unjust remarks. And I'm going to quote from a letter to the editor, to Paul D. Goddard. I was born in one of the most historic counties in the South. For over 150 years, my folks have been part of Jefferson County in East Tennessee. East Tennessee is the home of my forefathers, who built their homes deep among the ridges. They had come into the wilderness to make homes, to better their fortunes, and to enjoy the liberty they did not have in the older colonies. Much of the history of this nation was written here in the Tennessee Valley. This is our heritage. This is what a lot of the families and folks were impacted by this project, the Cherokee and the Douglas project in Jefferson County. So I want you to think about that heritage as we go through this program. Next date, September 12, 1941. Map of proposed Douglas Lake printed in the Dandridge banner. It was titled, "Dragon Threatens the Fertile Valley of French Broad, threatens the fertile French Broad Valley," excuse me. If you've seen a picture of the lake, and I'll show you one in a little bit, you know, it looks like a dragon, the proposed lake did. September 14th, 1941. Lake would flood 324 farms with 60,742 acres, producing $1,271,450 worth of agricultural products annually. September 18th, 1941. I would like to read a poem from Frances Burnett Swan that she sent into the paper, and it's titled, "What Shall Profit a Man?" Know you this region where the French Broad River flows, embracing mile-wide valleys, and the tall corn grows? The age-old hills encircle these lush and fertile plains, and all-sufficing Eden, replete with fruits and grains. From far, deep gushing springs cold crystal waters flow, to loiter kindly through the thirsty vale below. The embracing winds blow down, sunlit and soft the air. Know you who govern her, this land so good, so fair. Know you this loyal homeland where happy folk now dwell, in quiet, far from the city's unresting spell? A people native to the soil, well learned in freedom's ways, and holding to the better things of long gone days. Behind these mountain fortresses, the purest race of Anglo-Saxon blood known to time or place. O you whose powers unleash the flood, take heed lest your zeal destroy the greater worth, men the nation's best. I love that point. We move on to a date of October 21st, 1941. Headline, McKellar Dam request turned down in the Senate. Proposed to substitute two other dams for the proposed Douglas. Lilienthal insisted that Douglas Dam would meet defense needs better. October 30th, 1941. Office of Production Management, which is the OPM, to launch an all-out drive to obtain funds to start TVA's Douglas Dam. October 31st, 1941. Mandatory rationing of power in the southeast was ordered by the OPM. Drought conditions existed. November 4th, 1941. Article refers to the Douglas Bluff Project. I would like to note here that this appears to be the origin of the name for the lake and the dam, because it was on the Douglas land, the Douglas family's land, and the Douglas Bluff was where they started the dam. I'll come back to that later with some other information. WVIR radio debate includes Fred Bush and Mayor H.B. Jarnagin. The TVA representatives did not show up. H.B. Jarnagin states that the basin area is worth more as a food-producing unit than for power, since the power could be obtained in other ways. My grandfather, H.B. Jarnagin, was mayor of Dandridge during this time. He was mayor for 40 years, during 1930 to 1970 in Dandridge. And he fought to save Dandridge. November 21st, 1941, McKellar rejects FDR's dam plea. The President states that no other dam could be built as quickly to provide the needed power. November 25th, 1941, Douglas Dam funds voted down by House Appropriations Subcommittee. November 29th, 1941, Dandridge Mayor wraps TVA work at dam site. Flagrant waste of taxpayers' money. He branded surveying as highly premature and refers to TVA's efforts to get an appropriation for the dam under the cloak of national defense. December 1941, still no funding for Douglas Dam. The core drillers, surveyors, and abstractors at the courthouse have moved on. Things are looking up for the folks around Dandridge at this point. December 6, 1941, Douglas Dam has become the center of controversy between the President, TVA, and the defense officials on the one hand, and Senator McKellar and the opposition from the canning interest on the other. December 7th, 1941. What's this date represent? Pearl Harbor. It's not mentioned in Reverend Pritchett's articles. I was surprised it wasn't in there, but I think it's very important to note the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the next day on the 8th of December, the U.S. declares war on Japan. This changes the whole tide of feelings of what's going on between the government, TVA, and the Douglas Project. December 1941, headline, blocking dam may cost lives, TVA heads say. On several occasions recently, the President of the United States has, in the strongest terms, urged immediate construction of Douglas Dam because in no other way anywhere in the country can this essential block of power be produced so quickly for war needs. War materials and planes are mentioned in this article. December the 16th, 1941. One of the chief advantages of the Douglas site over all others is the fact that machinery used at Cherokee can be transported over the hills to Douglas and put into operation in a minimum of time. December 1941. Third Supplemental National Defense Appropriation Bill list of projects. Douglas not included. January 5th, 1942. If construction started by presidential order, it could offer a way out for the embattled Senator McKellar, who is apparently beginning to feel the pressure of public displeasure over his course of opposition, not only from Tennessee, but from virtually all other sections of the nation. January 9th, 1942. McKellar to confer with FDR. We'll go to the White House next week to discuss the Douglas Dam project with President Roosevelt. January 15th, 1942. McKellar surrenders. Way cleared for the dam. Senator Kenneth D. McKellar today bowed to President Roosevelt and announced he would no longer fight the Douglas Dam. His letter is printed in one of the newspaper articles, and I'd like to read it to you. It is significant. I'm going to get my reading glasses out on a few of these that are kind of small. Your letter of January 13th has been received. You say, they, the government agencies concerned, have concluded that immediate initiation of the project is essential to the defense program. With the greatest sympathy for your point of view, I can reach no other conclusion. Again, you say, now in the face of the vast conflict in which we are engaged, I must ask your continued help in connection with the Douglas Project. In view of these statements in which you assume, as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, entire responsibility for the building of Douglas Dam as a part of the defense program, there's nothing left for me to do but acquiesce. As there are so many other dam sites in East Tennessee just as available, and from which power could be generated just as quickly, it seems to me there is no justification for the destruction of this fruitful French Broad River Valley, so necessary to the furnishing of food to our Army and Navy, and especially for such a comparatively small amount of power as can be generated at Douglas Dam. Of course, it is true that since I began the fight against Douglas Dam, war has been declared against the United States by Japan, Germany, and Italy, and these countries are busily engaged in actual fighting. You are Commander-in-Chief of the United States. Under the circumstances, therefore, I shall continue to fight against this dam no longer. But I take this position only out of an abundance of caution in what I hope to be the interest of our national defense. I'm glad to know the dams and steam plant already provided for in the bill recently passed are being built. They will furnish several times the amount of power to be obtained from Douglas Dam. Respectfully yours, Kenneth McKellar. January 19th, 1942, $30 million okayed for the Douglas Dam. January 23rd, 1942, House approves $30 million for the Douglas Project. January 29th, 1942, the Dandridge banner, first mention of the possible dike to save Dandridge. And I would like to read from you an article that they put in the paper titled, "The Army and the Dam." Today has been a hard day for us, and the old adage that when it rains it pours applied mightily well. We were ordered to active duty with the Army as a reserve officer, and the Senate put its final okay on the Douglas Dam. We're not a diehard, we hope, but it would give us more to look forward to if we could think of coming back to the old home and expect to find it mostly as we left it and not a mud hole in the front yard. But we are just in the same shape of some who said they would rather have the dam than see their sons go to the Army. Well, their sons have gone, and we have the dam. Despite the urgent need for the dam expressed by high officials of TVA, we still don't think we would have lost our life if it had not been built. And their statements that you can grow vegetables and crops on those hills as well as on the bottom land, well, personally, we don't think even they believe that. As much as we like to eat, we like to see something growing at home. As for the need for power in 1943, if it is as urgent as they say, why is TVA today in Kentucky trying to help arrange to sell power to cities there that already have their own source of power? There must be a surplus somewhere if power can be spared for those cities when it could be used for building those thousands of bombers the Knoxville News Sentinel's been harping on for so long. We hate to leave home when times here seem almost as troubled as in the foreign places, but we took military training so we could be of service to our country if the need ever arose, and we leave in 3 weeks to do our bit in the armed forces. And we leave, if not with a happy heart, certainly a willing one. We would not predict when the war will be over, but we would like to quote our warrior, Senator McKellar, "Since Douglas won't be ready until 1943, according to TVA estimates, it postpones the winning of the war, since the war can't be won because David Lilienthal and James Krug can't get power until late 1943, and without the power from Douglas Dam, they are of the opinion the war can't be won." Interesting article, eh? January 29th, 1942, Dandridge banner headline, "At last, the dragon has us." There's the headline, and there's the dragon. You see what the proposed lake looks like. And so the local people coined it the dragon. January 31st, 1942. TVA begins work on Douglas Dam. President Roosevelt signed the bill providing for Douglas Dam construction yesterday, and almost immediately the TVA announced beginning of work on the site. February 4th, 1942, Knoxville Journal proposes name change to Douglas MacArthur Dam. Part of this article, the idea for this program started with a request from Derek at the Chamber of Commerce, and he contacted me one day and asked me how Douglas Dam and Douglas Lake got its name. And I knew there were two theories and two things I had read through history about how it got its name, and so I did. That started me reading in Reverend Pritchett's scrapbook to find the answer, and that was the start of this program. And I'll tell you what I found and what I told him. In the beginning, we talked about the Douglas Bluffs project. So that was one of the options. The other one was I'd heard about Douglas MacArthur Dam. Well, toward the end of the project, in the latter part of 42, there was a petition from the Knoxville Journal to rename the dam to the Douglas MacArthur Dam in honor of World War II Army General, Commander of the U.S. Army and the Philippine Army in the Southwest Pacific Theater. The Knoxville newspaper at this time began to refer to the dam as the Douglas MacArthur Dam, and they did so from then on. They kept calling it the Douglas MacArthur Dam, but I found no evidence anywhere that the government or TVA ever changed the name. There was discussion about it, and the requests continued to come in from the Knoxville News Sentinel, but they never changed the name. So it's the Douglas Bluffs that I say we brought the name to our community for the Douglas Dam and Douglas Lake. February 12th, 1942, Dandridge Banner article on conditions in Dandridge, titled God of War Shows Self in Dandridge. This one will give you an idea of what the people in Dandridge were encountering during this period. God of War shows self in Dandridge. National defense, first aid, dam construction, sending boys to armed services are changes in our civic life. It has been difficult for those of us living in the second oldest town in the state, conforming to a quiet mode of life near the Great Smoky Mountains, to realize that a war is actually in progress. 2 years ago, our knitting mill, our first industrial plant, was an innovation. Later we heard of and saw Cherokee Dam constructed in the county to aid in the manufacture of aluminum for airplanes. We have seen the county organized for defense under C.E. Pyatt. We have given waste paper to the Boy Scouts to aid defense. Have seen first aid classes get underway, and we've sent our boys to the armed forces. But the bombshell did not strike Dandridge until we saw men setting up their tripods in the streets, and others came crashing through our yards to place measuring tapes around our homes. Today we have a Central Information Bureau at the drugstore in Dandridge, and Newport and White Pine boldly display signs giving room and board to workers. Folks are scurrying about fixing accommodations to supply the demand. Through the Dandridge streets we see large-scale hauling of machinery as well as gravel, etc. To some of us it looks as though Cherokee Dam itself is being moved. Then the railroad spur from Sevierville to the site assists even further. In the courthouse too there are changes. Desks are lined in rows as close together as possible, with fluorescent lights flooding the halls and typewriters clicking their tattoo. Even W.J. swings a club and carries the key to the records for the night shift. We've seen the Hedrick House sold and the Jefferson County Motor Company disbanded for the duration. War has closed Bush Brothers until the season for green vegetables arrives. Our mortuary, of which we've been so proud, has become an apartment house. The signs of war have surrounded us. We must endeavor and work for unity of the endeavor. Are you letting the crowd pass by your door? Or do you have a job to be done bigger than you've done before? What are you doing to aid the preservation of all that we folks have gained? We hope that we shan't be called upon to make the sacrifice of giving up our homes. What are you doing about it? March 1st, 1942. Ceremony at dam site and a letter from Roosevelt. March the 5th, 1942. TVA sends letters to the Douglas landowners. Can you imagine what you felt like when you got that letter? March the 26th, 1942. Dandridge Banner headline, TVA will dike Dandridge from reservoir. Quote from Lilienthal on Planning Commission. The able way in which the Planning Commission of this historic community of Dandridge has presented the facts to our staff has had a great deal to do with the conclusion to build the dike. Now, the idea of that dike was not a government idea, it wasn't a TVA idea. Town of Dandridge formed a Planning Commission at this point. How are we going to deal with the changes and issues that this dam and the rising waters of Douglas Lake is going to cause in Dandridge? There was a low area that the creeks and water flowed out of Dandridge down the French Broad River, and the lake was going to back up right in the middle of our historic district. And that Planning Commission, that is the group that came up with the idea for this dike. They submitted the idea to the Army Corps of Engineers and the TVA, who studied it and deemed it doable, appropriated $1 million to purchase the property and build that dike. So it was the town of Dandridge who came up with that idea. April 9th, 1942. Jefferson County Court resolution protesting prices offered for TVA for their land. May 21st, 1942. Lilienthal praises dam, perhaps TVA's greatest single contribution to winning of this war. September 1962. Article by Reverend Pritchett on erosion. This is quite interesting. Now remember, this is 20 years after the construction of the dam. This is 1962 when he wrote this article on erosion. And this is just an excerpt from it, but it's very interesting. Reverend Pritchett addresses the issue of the continuing deposit of sand, silt, and vegetable matter and concentrates from so many sources moving by gravity and the action of water to lower levels. The tendency will be to finally level up all of the TVA artificial dams. It may take many centuries, in some cases, for some of the dams to fill up, but the mills of God grind slow but sure. The time will come when the lakes will be all leveled up and the river will continue to pour over the concrete, artificial, impounding dam until it will finally wear away and gradually turn the great mass of sediment loose, and it will find its way down the stream, and the process of disintegration and erosion will continue as long as God sees fit to keep His earth intact. We are confident that the TVA lakes will fill up. Very interesting perspective from Reverend Pritchett. Look at your list of players that we handed out. Who has not been mentioned on that list of players?
The people.
What did I hear over there?
The people. Oak Ridge.
Oak Ridge. Look on your list of players. The Secret City, Oak Ridge. The government had purchased 60,000 acres of land in Oak Ridge, and they were developing the Manhattan Project, development of our first atomic bomb, in secrecy. And it was never mentioned in any of these TVA. It was not being reported on. It was all done in secrecy. I just think that's amazing that a project of that magnitude was not being reported on. I'm sure the government would put the hiatus on and told people they couldn't do it. I want to share with you a couple of pictures I got from a website. This website's www.theatlantic.com, The Secret City. And there's some wonderful pictures of the Oak Ridge project there. And the first one I want to show you is, this is some of the land. There's a pioneer log cabin. Can everybody see that picture? And in the background is the beginning of the Y-12 construction. And I just think the dichotomy of the cabin and construction of what at that time was going to be the world's largest project is just amazing. I also want to show you this one from the website. There was an all-out effort to sell the war effort to the people and get them behind it, and rightfully so. But they were putting up billboards all around East Tennessee, and this is one that I found very interesting that's titled, "Whose son will die in the last minute of the war? Minutes count." Look at this, look at this. Isn't that an interesting billboard that they put up? And they put lots of them up like this around the area. Anybody can come up and look at these a little later. You know, for years, I wanted to know what were the feelings and emotions the local people went through when they saw the lake filling up for the first time. And I would ask people. A lot of the men I asked are gone now, and they were gone when it happened because they served in World War II. They went away and came back, and there's the lake. You know, my father, your Frank Hodge, your Jason Miller, you know, these guys, they don't have any memory of it. And a lot of the people that stayed here, a lot of the men were boys, and they didn't have a real clear memory. So I'd ask and ask around, and I finally got an unbelievable answer. And this was on October the 8th of 2014, and Bobby Gaddis was driving by in his car in front of my office, and I stopped, and we were talking about something else. He had the window rolled down. And I knew he lived over there south of the river, and they had the land that was flooded. And I asked Bobby the question, you know, do you remember the lake coming up? And he said, I certainly do. And I said, tell me about it. And this is directly from Bobby, because I went right into my office and recorded this on the computer as soon as I got through talking to him. He remembers the lake filling up for the first time, lived in the Hills Union area. His father farmed the McMahon Island property, and they kept a small boat to go back and forth from their property over to the island across the river to farm it. And Bobby went with his father in their boat, and as the lake filled up, he recalls all the debris floating, including lots of dead animals. And I hadn't thought about the plight of the animals and reptiles, you know, that were trapped as the lake rose. He says it was a mess. I asked him how long he thought it took to fill up, and he said he thought it only took about a month for the lake to fill up. I asked him how it made him feel, and what were his emotions involved in this. And this is his quote. As the water rose around our property, we felt caged. Water was on all sides, and it was like we were trapped. There's a very unique aspect of how the land was obtained by the government on the Douglas project that you don't find on the other lakes around here. It's the use of easements versus buying in fee simple. And we had a little meeting that year out at Susan Gass's house, and Lorraine Hance was there, and Bobby was there, and we talked about some of this, and they indicated that most of the people thought that they were going to get their land back one day. And here's an example of it. Larry Churchwell put me onto this. He said a lot of this land, when they sold it the next time after the lake was built, they included a right of reversion clause if it touched the lake property. And this is out of Deed Book 188, page 79. This is Ethel B. Cooper to Sam Graham and Andrew Reagan. This is part of the old Robert Birchfield farm that was back in Muddy Creek. And the deed ends with this sentence: provided that in the event Douglas Dam is destroyed or dismantled, the property below elevation 1007 will revert to the party of the first part or her heirs and assigns.
I'm still paying taxes on land underwater.
Yeah.
Well, in Pat Whaley's farm, her family's farm,
Yeah.
that's where Lorna lives, and she's bought part of that, and part of that is underwater.
Yeah.
My father died thinking that the lake was sealed in.
Did he really?
Yeah.
God, wow. Well, Reverend Britt, I bet you read Reverend Britt's article.
And actually, the dam itself is not attached; it floats.
Really?
The Boy Scouts a few years ago got to tour inside the dam. That doesn't happen anymore. But anyway,
Yeah, I've been
they got
in
to tour
Yeah.
inside, and the original Westinghouse generators are still operational where they were installed. But the dam itself, it floats. It is not secure to the earth,
Yeah.
which is kind of unique for dam.
Back on this thought I threw out there about was our government selling a false hope to our local people? And I just think maybe they were, in hopes that people would give up their fight, over the valuable farmland up and down the French Broad River, in hopes that this wasn't a permanent project. And I just think that's got something to do with it. And part of the reason some of these people still don't trust TVA today. I'd like to wrap up with some thoughts, personal thoughts about this. When I started developing the ideas for this program, I told you it was after Derek had approached me at the chamber, and was reading these articles and preachings and coming up with some ideas. And this was September of last year, and September is when we have Music on the Town in Dandridge. And it was one of those Thursday nights, and I like to sit on top of the dike and watch the band down below in the parking lot and have Douglas Lake in my back. And night had fallen, the band was playing. I got up out of my lawn chair to kind of stretch my legs, and I turned around and I looked at the lake, and there was a big bright moon that night. And the moon was glistening on the water of the lake. It was a beautiful sight. And I had thoughts of history made part of this program. I thought about how the lake in my lifetime had been a thing of beauty and enjoyment for me. All the hours of walking along the shoreline and fishing, exploring, swimming in the lake, water skiing and boating all over the lake. The back of my house looks across this beautiful Douglas Lake with the mountains in the background, and it's the first thing I do when I get up in the morning. I go out and look at that view. So it's been a thing of joy for me. But then my thoughts went to the other side of history lost. When I thought about my grandfather, who moved here to Dandridge in 1919 and bought a house on the ridge overlooking the French Broad River. And my father growing up with the river and on the river. My father goes off in 1942 to World War II. He's in the Navy. He's serving in the Pacific Theater. And when he comes back, the river's been replaced by the lake. And what a shock that must have been for these men. I thought about the feelings and the emotions of the people who lived near the river as they watched the rising waters of this new TVA lake slowly and slowly engulf their homelands. I thought about the people who watched as the workers came and cut down the stately old trees that lent their name to communities like Oak Grove and Shady Grove that were completely flooded out by the lake. I thought about the people who watched as their houses and businesses were torn down and burned. I thought about the church members of Shady Grove Methodist Church. It was in the 1930s when a disastrous tornado, which is pretty rare, came through Shady Grove and destroyed their frame church. They built it back better and stronger. They built it out of stone. Well, they stood by and they had to watch as the government officials came in and dynamited their church into a pile of rubble. And now, today, those ruins, along with 10,000 years of our Native American history, lie entombed beneath the waters of Douglas Lake. And as I had those thoughts, a tear trickled down my cheek. That's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, we live, across from the lake from where you live today.
Yes.
And we rented every room available to workers because gas was rationed. The only bed and breakfast we had was up here across the first fire hall. And I remember Hodges Hardware had a pool room underneath.
Yeah.
We had a skating rink behind and a little theater
Mm-hmm.
for the workers because there was no other entertainment.
It's
And,
across from the McMahon's service station.
where the flower shop is.
Mm-hmm.
That was known as the, well, I just said, it
I think I went to movies there, but I can't remember
was
it.
9 cents to get in, I remember that. Why they didn't charge a dime
I remember going to movies in White Pine better than I do Dandridge.
Yeah.
in Dandridge.
There was a movie
But,
theater in White Pine. There were used to be a lot of things in White Pine.
Yes, they
Uh,
are.
It was a door or two down from Sanitary Drug in that same block. And I remember going to see Bambi there when it was new.
It's a nice theater. It really was. It was a nice theater at the time, you know.
Yeah.
Tell me about the ferry.
What?
The ferry.
Oh, yes, the ferry. We had to cross the ferry.
Yeah, because they took the bridge
Took the
before they
bridge,
started building the dam.
We had
That's
to
right.
move on that ferry. Yes, we docked, you know, docked down behind the library.
Did it dock right off your all's property? Or close to it?
Yes, close to it,
Uh-huh.
and, yes, and I got to ride the, flat boat that, dredged for the sand with Jeff's, what would be Christie's great-great-grandfather.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Colonel Swan, he let me go with him
Mm-hmm.
until I put sand in their drinking water. I wasn't allowed, their buckets, you know, I wasn't allowed to go back on
Tell me about the tree moving here from Sam.
Oh,
From Shady
yes.
Grove in the wagon.
My husband, they were displaced from Shady Grove, and they moved out to the present site where we live today, and they moved in a wagon, and he and his brother Harry, they had a few cows, and they rode in the back of the wagon, and they had shucks that, you know, came off the corn, and they would throw it out to the cows, and if the cows stopped, they'd feed them some more, and that's how they moved their belongings out to Highway 92 today.
Yeah.
There was no trucks back then,
Yeah.
and in 39.
I meant to mention this to you at the beginning. Look at this. I want you to see. This is what it was all about, folks.
Yes.
Look at this. This is taken from the hill back there behind Maury Middle School. There's the French Broad River with English Mountain in the background, you see. And this is a picture that I think Frank Hodge took. And it's one that I keep hanging on my wall down in my office, but I just love that. And look at all the grain and corn. And this was the richest farmland in all of Jefferson County, was probably from down in Shady Grove up to Newport. And this is what the people were fighting for. The land was much more valuable as a food producing item, you know, than the power that was going to go to the Manhattan Project or to Alcoa for the government, for the war effort. So,
Right. In the factory, you know, that we had in Oak Grove and in White Pine in Leadville, you know, the Stokeleys had the big factory there with that beautiful antebellum home now, and then the one in Oak Grove.
yeah.
Of course, the TVA is more personally here because people lost their farms, and then in Middle Tennessee, of course, there are TVA dams all over. There was one where my dad's family is from, and it's Tim's Ford Reservoir, and there were, you know, and we've seen the results of this with doing our genealogical research, that many graves were moved as a result of these dams that were built.
Oh yeah, they had
But
to re-intern all the cemetery.
It was sold to the rest of the southeast as a rural electrification project, because one of the things, I guess a byproduct of building these dams was flood control, because Dandridge would flood on a regular basis.
And downstream, Chattanooga flooded every city.
Many other places flooded, and it provided electricity. Where my dad lived, They did not have electricity until 1945. And they lived in
Well, we talk about flooding. Somewhere I've got a picture of my grandfather in a rowboat in front of the courthouse in Sevierville.
Yeah.
Going down the street. Yeah, I mean.
I remember an article in one of those newspaper articles in Pritchett's scrapbook that said something to the effect of they couldn't make sense of why did it make sense to flood valuable agricultural land in Jefferson County so that lands in Mississippi didn't flood.
Yeah.
You know, how do you justify this? Yeah. And that was, one of the ideas.
And it wasn't just Tennessee where the government was doing this either, because my ancestors came from Indiana. They were there in the early 1800s. And if you go to the Children's Museum in Indianapolis today, there's one whole section talking about when they flooded all the farmland around Indianapolis and Hamilton County and did the same thing, and people lost all their property with some of the same cutting, picking stories that don't make sense. So it was happening in other places too, just as bad as it is here.
Do you know when they decided on Oak Ridge for the Manhattan Project? Because you were saying McKellar conceded in December, I think, on the Douglas Dam. Do you know when they, because I'd always heard, oh, they built Douglas Lake because for fuel for Oak Ridge.
Well, that was part of their argument.
So I was just, but was there an impetus for the Manhattan Project prior to Pearl Harbor?
Yes, yes.
So it was going on.
If you go to the museum in Oak Ridge, there's the National Museum of Atomic Energy. Very interesting place to go. There's all kinds of writings about it, and yes, it was being planned before then.
So, but had they planned on it being in Oak Ridge?
Yes, because they were buying it. Well, her mother-in-law,
so
their family farm was bought for Oak Ridge. They had to move.
So that was
what year it
prior
was
to
bought?
Pearl Harbor.
I don't know what year.
I don't know what year either, but I've always heard that McKellar was chairman of appropriations.
Yes.
And Roosevelt told him one day that he needed X amount of dollars hidden in the budget because it was a secret. And McKellar says, just where in Tennessee would you like me to hide it?
What happened was Einstein was German, and he knew about the atomic bomb that was being planned by Germany and the heavy water that they needed
Einstein
for all that. And he wrote a letter to President Roosevelt, and Roosevelt hesitated, and then he thought about it, and he started thinking about it, and they started planning the Manhattan Project. That's also why they did the Smoky Mountains about the same time, because they wanted kind of like an area that wasn't built up, and that would, I can't explain why they did the Smoky Mountains, but the Smoky Mountains was not made just to be a national park because they wanted a national park. It had to do with the Manhattan Project also.
Well,
it sure did.
But I thought Tennessee and North Carolina sort of forced the park on the fence. I don't know, maybe not.
It was written up, I can't explain it, but it's at that museum.
Oh, okay.
Bob, you might want to mention too, on the steps going up to the courthouse where the water would have come to, isn't there a marker?
Yeah, there. Most of our historic district would have been lost had it not been for the dike constructed to hold back the waters of the lake. And when they came in and did their surveying to see where the level of the lake would be, they placed a bronze marker on the second step of our courthouse, which represents the full pool of the lake. I don't think it's the 1,002, which is the height of the dam, but where they would expect a normal full pool of lake to reach to. So they were going to have to, build even a new courthouse in the county. So that's an interesting historic marker, and you see them out here just right off the steps outside. You'll see a property of U.S. DVA property out here because they bought the Hedrick farm, which is the Hedrick house is now town hall. They bought the farm, and it went all down the French Broad River, and that's why the library is built on that piece of property. And it goes all the way down to the Hunter's property down there, and that's where they got their materials. The raw materials for the construction of the dike was off the Hedrick farm, and they occupied the farm, the Hedrick house, during this time, and then they turned around and gave it back to the town with the stipulation it's always used for public use.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's my
Has to be
understanding
public
if
use.
the town quits using it, that the TVA
Yeah.
gets it back.
Well, they can't sell it the town can't sell it and take the money off of it. It could probably be given to another nonprofit entity. That's why we have the library in there. You've had the Masonic Lodge in there. You know, if they're public institutions, they can be housed in there, but not private business. Yeah.
And what about the bridge that was built for when they did the dam and we're getting it replaced again?
Well, the current bridge, the steel truss bridge that we have today would have been constructed during 1942 to replace the smaller bridge that was down there on the river. They floated that one downstream and put it below the dam for many years. You know, that thing, it has a wooden plank bridge. I remember going to, when I was a kid, driving across it, going up to the Gatlinburg Country Club where we would swim as kids, and you go clank, 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 and you look out the window and you could see through some of the slats down, you can see the river down there.
And if you were at the picnic tables there by the dam, you could hear people go across the bridge because the flags would come up.
But then this one that they're replacing now was built in 1942. It was built to the standards of those days, which is 18 feet wide. Well, the standard now is 44 feet wide, and that's one of the main reasons, in my opinion, they want to replace it. Number two, they don't want to keep maintaining that expensive to paint and maintain steel truss bridge, so they're trying to replace all those with newer, modern concrete bridges. But that's another controversy. I'm sure there was a controversy in 42. You know, we had a controversy over this, and now there's a controversy over the replacement of the bridge and where it should be and how it should be constructed. And just the ongoing conflicts with our community. And
The new dock.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Bob, what about the Pritchard home? Is it still standing? Is it?
Pritchard's?
Yes.
Yes, it's still out there on Brethren Church Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still there. I don't know who owns it today, but it's a frame house with some columns on the porch, I think, and it's still out there today. Yeah.
I don't think anybody's living in it anymore. Last time I went by, you could barely see it from.
Really, it was all grown up around it, was it? I haven't been out there. I'd like to walk around on it because there's a story that the old historic Gentry cemetery is in the front yard of it, but nobody can give me any evidence that it's actually there. But there's supposed to be some Civil War soldiers buried out there, and
that
the
house
Gentry.
has got a lot of Civil War reference to it anyway. With the, there's supposed to be a cannonball in the wall, and a friend of mine lived in that house for a little while, and she's the one that told me a little bit about it.
Oh yeah,
it would be a neat
Brethren
house.
Church Road was one of the early routes, and there was a lot of the movement of Long Street coming toward Dandridge was along that route.
I was going to say, wasn't that one of the early stagecoach roads?
Part of it would have been used. That would have been a road to the bend of the Chucky. You know, on up to Bull's Gap.
Isn't it part of the same road that my driveway is, for instance?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
The front of your house is actually.
Yeah, my house,
With
my
the
house
driveway.
faces the old road, so from 2570 you see the kitchen windows.
Yeah.
So you're part of the old State Road 1?
Stagecoach Road.
Well, I'm glad that this program has brought a lot of memories back to some of you folks, and we've enjoyed our conversation afterwards, I think, as much as the program. So that's what it's meant to do, get people thinking. You probably noticed that I seem to lean toward the side of history lost issue in this. I really have an emotional feeling about what these people went through and an attachment to the history of this county, and I think it's sad what we lost during this, but progress marches on, and this won't be the last time that we have to deal with strife in our lives because of progress. Hope you enjoyed this program.
Thank you.
It's original and all. Oh,
Got 'em.